answer the infamous question of every newbie. We create cartoons in Adobe Flash. You have two main choices when it comes to which version to use. Flash 8 is a great pick for people who have no experience with Adobe products or animating in general. Since it was made for mid-2000s computers, you can run it on essentially anything without performance issues. But since it's been commercially discontinued, you can download it for free. The downside is that it runs on ActionScript 2.0, meaning it can't open files from later versions that use ActionScript 3.0 exclusively. Now, the program most animators use is Adobe Animate CC. Although it has more functions and you can open both ActionScript 2.0 and 3.0 files, it's harder to run and harder to download. But if you think your PC can handle it, go for it. Flash is definitely one of the easier programs to get a hold of if you've never used Adobe products before. First, let's go over what we see once we open it. You want to create a new file with a 640 by 360 diameter canvas. That's the standard 16 by 9 screen ratio. Unlike most other forms of animation, which settle for 24 FPS, we create movies in 30 FPS. After hitting create, we're met with our main working station. On the left are tools. You should be familiar with them if you've ever used MS Paint before. On the right are iconic panels, which contain things such as the library, color schemes, and properties. On the bottom is our timeline, and in the middle is our preview canvas, where we do most of the work. There are lots of tools in our arsenal, but here are all the hotkeys for the most useful ones. Alternatively, you can go to Edit, Keyboard Shortcuts, if you want to map the hotkeys yourself. A timeline is where we create frames. F5 creates a new frame space, which determines how long the layer is present on screen. F6 creates a new frame while keeping the contents of the old one, and F7 creates a new blank frame. The way Flash works is that once you draw something, you can turn it into what's called a symbol, which we mainly use to animate madness with. Symbols are divided into three types: graphics, buttons, and movie clips. Buttons can be ignored since they're made for Flash games. Graphics and movie clips work similarly. The difference being with graphics is that you can animate within the symbols or loop and choose individual frames inside of a symbol itself, and then see them on the preview screen. Whereas with movie clips, you can't see the animated symbol until you export the animation, but instead you can apply filters to the symbols such as glow and blur. If you're asking about why we shouldn't just have one option that allows us to do both, I'd like to note too. It's confusing at first, but you should get the hang of it. Once you animate with the symbol, you can change its properties. Every frame containing it will also change. There's also another option, which you can think of as a temporary symbol. With Ctrl-G, we create a group, which, unlike graphics or movie clips, will not change anywhere except for the one frame when you edit it. It also can't hold more than one layer and doesn't appear in the library. How symbols are positioned is determined by which layer they're placed on. Layers higher up will be placed on top of the canvas. We can also place several symbols in one frame and reorient their position with Ctrl+ and Ctrl-. For the sake of organization, you should place adjacent layers into folders which can be renamed. Normal layers can be turned into masks, which work similarly to folders except they serve a different function. Masking allows one to make symbols and other elements disappear while not actively having to change the symbol itself. One other thing to mention regarding frames is tweening. When placing a symbol in two different frames, you can auto-generate a transitional animation between two positions using shape tweens, and adjust the smoothing in the Properties section under tweening. Any other actions can be accessed by left-clicking on the symbol. When animating, you should turn on Onion Skin, which shows you the last two frames that you'd animated. The second option does the same thing, but with outlines instead. It's a matter of preference. Third allows us to manipulate the previous frames that we've animated. However many frames that you want to see can be adjusted here. Another thing is to make sure that you disable all snapping options in View, Snapping, and check off this magnet thing too. In Animate CC, we have an option to use a built-in camera, but unless you're using more advanced techniques like modifying your animation in Adobe Effects, you won't need to use it. Instead, we use what's called a VCam. It works similarly to masking, where you only see what's being covered by it. Once you have the layers set up, we can get into setting up the basics. Here you have a body. Let's put it right here. The head goes in front somewhere over here, and the feet go behind the body. Add two hands, one in the front and one in the back. Now we're ready to animate. We start with the body. Press F6 and move it forward very slightly. F6 and move it a bit more than you previously did. Do this a couple more times, and now our body is almost in full motion. Alternatively, you can use your arrow keys and simply press in the direction that your character is moving for even smaller movements. What we did there is called an ease in, meaning when our character starts to move, they slowly progressively get faster until they've reached the desired speed. To make our character stop, we do the opposite. Slowly ease the character into a stop. The head's probably the simplest part of the body to animate. Best way to describe it would be as a follow-through of the body. It works with similar rules as the body, except we also want to implement a slight delay so it bounces and doesn't act too stiff or glued to the body. Also, try to keep an eye contact of whatever the character's looking at. A protagonist staring into the abyss while shooting is a pretty common goof. Always make sure you're using the correct hands, because very often people mistake them for the left or the right and flip them in wrong ways and other stuff. Keep a rational distance away from the body. Normally, it's easy to spot when your hands are too far away, but in cases like these, it can be less obvious. You see how big the weapon is to the right? Nothing looks out of the ordinary until you remove it. When animating feet, you're given a big decision to make. Should you animate on one layer or two? It's mostly about preference, but there are some key differences. With one layer, it takes less time to animate because you're only working once and don't have to go over and animate 2 feet separately. But it's also easier to control the final product with 2 feet, especially when you're just starting out. People often mess up and lose control, but on the bright side, 2 layers are more fun to animate and are way less tedious to do. Feet are usually an afterthought for most animators. They're there just to be there, but if you look at how movement works in real life, you will notice that the legs are what propel the body. So, if you want to be a pro, make the body react to the feet's movement instead of the other way around. But that's a lot of work, so we're just going to animate a couple of steps like this. Okay, this is our final product. Now, if you followed along, you might notice that your results might differ from mine. To help you out, I'll share a secret with you. Unlike other animation methods, Animating Madness is all about muscle memory and keeping the flow. Move symbol, F6, repeat. So, you should spend your first moments in the program getting accustomed to this flow. Veteran animators don't even pay attention most of the time when animating because they're so used to animating movements like this that it comes naturally to them. Do you remember how I was talking about animating feet? Making idle animation is basically that. Instead of the body, you focus on the character's footwork. So look, you want to make this character shuffle around. The first thing we do is animate a small step. Whether you want to animate the body or the feet first is your choice. Afterward, we make another step and so on. An important thing to remember is that you should do it slowly, meaning adding a lot of frames, so be patient and try not to rush this. Animating shuffling is usually a hassle, but the result looks better and more live than a guy standing stiff and not moving. Now, we combine everything we've learned so far to create some melee combat. We start with the character preparing to swing the bat and implement the ease-in technique. He slowly starts to move the bat upwards just like that, and takes a hold of it with his next hand. When grabbing the bat, we'll also add a small reaction to the bat's movements, so on contact, the bat will slightly tilt for a couple of frames. Here we can add some shuffling to make the animation look more organic. What we do next is called anticipation. The grunt will slowly move and tilt the bat behind his head to prepare his swing. When creating melee fights, anticipation is the most important part because it's one of the core things that gives the fighting its physical feeling. And now, the swing. Again, the slow in makes it feel really dynamic and the swing will only take 1 frame. Later, we're going to add another grunt, so here, let's pretend he's hitting him over the head in this frame. When creating the results of an impact, there are 2 things to consider: in what direction an object is moving and in what angle it hit its target. If there was nothing in way of the bat would go in this direction. But since it's meant to hit a guy on the head, we have to take into account what direction the bat will bounce off. We finished the move off with a slow out, and this is how it turned out. Here we have another grunt ready to get hit. At the point of impact, we want to focus on the part of the body getting hit while the rest of it follows along. The head tilts back in relation to the force and tries to stabilize itself after the shock. Think of getting hit as a disruption. When getting hit, the character changes his position and after the impact tries to get back to his original state. We can imagine getting hit over the head would probably give someone a concussion, so the grunt's going to take a few steps backwards like shuffling instead, but this time a bit faster. And now he's ready to fall. A lot of beginners can create good falling objects, but their fatal mistake is forgetting that a body is a falling object as well. So first, how do you animate gravity? Let's take a look at this cube for example. It's going to fall on the floor right here. If you can see how things fall in real life, you might notice that they accelerate downwards, but what does that mean? It means falling things keep getting faster. For us, it means that if an object is falling and has gone this far between 2 frames, then on another it will go double that distance, and the distance traveled will keep multiplying until it hits the ground. There's also a weight of an object to take into account, but most objects you're going to be animating will fall at the same rate. I bring this up because a falling body works the same way. Right here, he's going to start falling. On frame 1, he's tilted this much, In another frame, he'll tilt this much, and then he'll double that, and so on and so forth. The head works the same way as I mentioned it before. We apply a little bit of delay to the tilt. How hands behave depend on how you want them to. Whether you want to pretend the characters have invisible arms or if they fall off independently of the body is up to your headcanon. Guns are easy. We best start with the pistol. If you look at how pistols are fired in real life, the visible recoil is practically non-existent. That's why animators often implement exaggeration. At the first frame, we pull back the slide and at this point the gun is already fired, so it's important to orient the direction that you want to shoot in. It's very common to have it fire in whatever direction and later not correct it, which ends up looking goofy. Now, to break down the recoil. As with practically everything else, it's about impact and recovery. On the frame of impact, the gun jolts back and tilts upwards. Rest of the action is recovery back to its original position. Same goes for other types of weapons. Bullets are represented by white lines. It's fine to simply draw one where the bullet will go in that frame, but what I like to do is add a slight delay on how it travels, so in frame 1 it is past this much distance, and in this one, another more. I think this looks nicer. So, if you remember my cube analogy, you should already know how this goes. A casing flies out of a chamber, goes upward, while slowly falling down at half the distance on each frame, until it stops rising and starts falling. The way it bounces from the floor is the same way as it goes out of the casing. The cycle continues until the casing is stationary. The biggest issue for beginners would have to be keeping the consistent rise and fall, and consistent curve. If you're messing up on that, feel free to draw out a line you want your casing to follow and animate over it until you get the hang of it. Now here are some tips to help you save some time. Turn the casing into a symbol and animate the spin beforehand. This saves a lot of time as you have to no longer constantly animate the spin. Go into the casing symbol and create a new layer behind it. In it, draw a square with an alpha set to 0. Now you won't keep messing up trying to grab the casing whenever trying to animate quickly. When applied, these tips and some practice will help you finish an individual casing in an average span of about 30 seconds. I'm aware it might be alluring to just use pre-animated shells, but I would heavily advise against it. In the short term, it might seem like another clever time saver, but every seasoned animator can see pre-animated shells when they see them. It's not only lazy, but it looks lazy. Don't mistake efficiency for laziness, nor laziness for efficiency. Like with learning any form of art, using references leads to the fastest improvement. The best case scenario is having an original FLA to learn from, but you can also analyze your favorite animations frame by frame. Let's take a look at this walking cycle from Sopak's animation as reference. Now what we're going to do is try and copy this frame by frame. I know this sounds sacrilegious, but we're not here to plagiarize anything, we're here to practice. And the purpose of practice is to feel out what animating madness is like. Fuck it, you can even animate over the original movements if you feel like it, it's all in the name of improvement.
Drawing blood splatters can be a bit tricky at times. It can have various complex patterns and origin points. Although using a pen and drawing tablet is the easiest way to make some good looking blood splatters, using your mouse is a viable option as well, although a bit more time consuming. The best way to start is with a big blob as your origin. Then, draw thinner lines coming from the main blob, trailing away in smaller beads. Try to alter the sizes of the blobs according to the way the blood splatters off from the origin point. Additionally, you can use Google to find references, such as paint splatters or ink. Drawing gore gets exponentially more difficult the more detail you put into it. Making a simple trademark crinkles gore is pretty simple. First, you mark the damaged area and fill it up with a darker red color. Then, you fill the edges with dots and such, and add blood splattered around the area, similar to the previous section. But that's baby shit, we can do better. The reason you might want to draw more realistic gore is that it communicates the brutality of what's happening in a better way. When watching Madden's cartoons, it's easy to let the bloody aspects of it slip into the background and forget they're even there, especially with how simplified Crinkle's standard gore is. So when you see someone's skull getting crushed while they get battered on their head, think to yourself, damn, that's pretty brutal. So here we want a guy getting his jaw punched out of his face. So we look up an image for reference of skull anatomy and work from there. If you don't find it fancy to look up real-life images of gore, the next best technique is using base anatomy references. Let's go do that right now. I'm using the site Sketchfab to quickly look up any 3D model references I need. It's usually quicker than opening up Blender. We start with the next step, that being marking out the damaged area and adding all the blood splatter. Next, we draw the bent out of shape jaw and the fleshy parts around it. The color palette is your choice. We can even add some of the skin deformation Crinkles has been implementing in his animations recently for more effect. When making a background, you need to keep perspective in mind. A type of perspective known as single point perspective is traditionally used in Madness. First of all, it helps to enable snapping, the magnet icon that appears for some tools in the toolbar, as well as to hold shift when drawing your objects, as that snaps them to strict angles, as well as allowing you to draw perfect squares and circles using the rectangle and oval tools respectively. First, draw a small cross, vertical and horizontal lines. The point where they intersect is the vanishing point. Next, draw a rectangle that encompasses the vanishing point in it, but doesn't intersect it. Now, draw 4 lines from the vanishing point to each corner of the rectangle. Finally, draw a second rectangle, smaller than the initial one, in a way that its corners are intersected by the lines from the vanishing point. Now, given that both your rectangles have perfectly vertical and horizontal lines, you have yourself a base for a room. When drawing doors, you want to take into account how tall the characters are. Again, we draw the perspective line, and then the line behind it will define how wide the door is. When drawing 2 doors on opposing sides, it's useful to make a reference line to position them correctly for consistency's sake. This line will define the thickness of the door. Issues may arise whenever you're making a longer room. If you follow the perspective cross, the end result on each side may look off, even when it's technically correct. That's why we're going to implement several perspective crosses throughout the background, so this part will follow this cross, and so on. Once you have your walls and props set, you color them and shade them. Traditionally, the 5 surfaces, the 5 walls of your room, will be of the same color, but with different brightness. The far wall will be the brightest, the left and right walls will be a single step dimmer in color, then the floor a little dimmer than those, and the ceiling will be the darkest. The same idea applies to the sides of your props. Top surfaces are bright, sides are darker, undersides the darkest. After the room and the props are done and colored, it would be beneficial to add smears, or grime, which is a pseudo middle ground between shading and properly texturing. On a technical level, these effects are best made using 2 or 3 layers of 8 to 10% transparent shading, as the smears are meant to have gradation in intensity, being wetter/darker closer to the corners and edges, and then being less intense or light when they dry out. This can be drawn with a brush for more granularity and a more natural feel, or with a pencil tool for speed and precision. These smears, their intensity and how they interact with objects in the room will largely dictate how the room feels, run down and dirty, or clean and maintained. Adding doors is pretty simple. You take the default door symbol and you put it on a layer behind the background. Next, you tilt it in relation to the background's perspective, make a new frame setting it to its open state. Tween in between the 2 frames, and then apply an in and out smoothing. All done. Since we now know how to make backgrounds, we can put them to use as more than just a backdrop. When designing a background, it's useful to consider how parts of it could be used as cover, to hide behind for either our protagonist or enemies. Crates, pillars, machinery, what have you. Generally, the most important component of making a great fighting choreography is keeping the flow going. Moves should lead from one move into another, and any downtime in action should be spent on setting up for the next encounter, like a character taking his time to reload his guns before entering the room. Alluding to guns, it's very easy to turn a shootout into a boring scene where the character is casually walking through and simply shooting people. The best way to avoid it is by integrating melee encounters into the gunplay. Let me show you what I mean. On the right is our protagonist, and in front of him are 2 guys, one behind another. The guy further along is going for a swing at the protagonist. The boring way of resolving this conflict would be our guy simply shooting one baddie after another. What we can do instead is make our guy dodge the first attacker, dive right past him, shoot the second baddie, grab the first guy, and then shoot him. Lastly, let's touch up on the enemies. The common idea of agents being incompetent actually comes from the proclivity of community tributes, making enemies stand around and wait to be killed, or just miss point-blank shots. One of the great things about how the action plays out in the original series is that enemies aren't incompetent buffoons, but are instead outplayed or outsmarted by the protagonists. A remedy to this error lies in carefully planning when the enemies are to appear on screen and what weapons they're meant to be fighting with. This underlines the importance of not only what happens on screen, but also when. Don't put your characters into situations they can't convincingly win. Emphasis on convincingly, because watching a protagonist bullshit their way through impossible scenarios is no fun. This section is for smaller things you might find useful when working on your projects. You might have noticed that I glanced over the aspects of drawing when talking about gore and backgrounds. That's because this isn't a drawing tutorial, meaning I also won't go in depth about making a character or weapon sprites. But one important thing to keep in mind is scaling your sprites to the character's anatomy. Too many times have I seen ridiculously huge weapon sprites or simply drawn over a rifle PNG. Make your sprites in relation to how the characters are shaped, not in a vacuum. In Flash, you have the ability to apply color effects to symbols, which allows you to apply transparency to your sprites. Normally, the lines and drawn objects will differ in look, and any layers you have in a symbol will stack on top of each other. To fix this, you have to make sure that your symbol is set to movie clip. Then, apply a filter blur to it and set it to 0. This will make it look how it's meant to look. Why it works that way, I couldn't tell you. Flash is known for its cumbersome features. Making whole characters transparent is even more of a headache. Beforehand, you have to animate the whole character, and then copy all the frames from each layer. Then, you create a new symbol and set it to movie clip. You paste all the frames inside it and position it where the first frame of your character was. Apply the blur and turn on the transparency. Now, what makes this process even worse is that you can't see your character's movements anymore in the preview mode. But once you export your animation, it will play out as intended. The same process goes for adding glow to your characters. If you remember, once you change the properties of a symbol, all the frames you made with that symbol also change. But that can be a blessing and a curse. Let's say you finished your sword fight animation, but then you forgot to add blood to the sword. Adding blood to it afterwards will change the entire animation, so here's a way to circumvent it. We copy all the frames where the sword is supposed to be covered in blood, and we paste them into a new file. We add the blood and change the symbol's name in the library. Then, we paste new frames into the place of the old ones. This method can be used for correcting mistakes where using swap symbol option isn't available. If you don't want to preview the entire movie every time you want to check your progress, for example, if the clip you're making is reaching sizable lengths, create a new layer, make a new blank frame, and right-click it. Next, go into Actions and write gotoAndPlay, and in the brackets, the frame number you want your preview to begin at. Once you're all done with your movie, download Swivel from Newgrounds. Import your SWF file into it, set all the video properties, and then click Convert. After it's done rendering your SWF file, it will be turned into a usable MP4. Oh yeah, and see this audio bracket? Make sure you set it to no audio. I should have mentioned this earlier, but you can add sound effects in Flash, but I wouldn't recommend doing sound work this way. It's cumbersome and impractical. Audio design is its own separate video that I won't go into here. A common critique of present-day madness animation is that everyone has the same style, but that's mainly because of how far we've progressed since the early 2000s. In the beginning, no one had a clue how to animate, so everyone experimented, but eventually a golden child named Del Mortes discovered the perfect formula for creating madness, and has since then shaped the way that we do it. And now, when everyone can animate as well as Del Mortes, people have to learn a valuable lesson. It's the content of the animation that matters. You can painstakingly animate each frame to perfection and still end up with a dogshit movie, because you're not showing anything interesting. Conversely, this is the exact reason why movies with bad animation can still end up being great. Animation is just a medium for expressing ideas. So if you don't have any, all you learned will go for nothing. And don't get me wrong, being creative isn't as hard as it seems. The main problem with most madness animators is that they've only been taking ideas from the original series, leading to a feedback loop of repetition and unoriginality. Creativity is all about recontextualizing and blending ideas from other mediums. So go watch a movie and take inspiration from it. And by movies, I don't mean John Wick or any other popular media. No, everyone has already seen that. Go watch something obscure and rediscover great ideas like people had years ago. You develop your style by first learning the basics. Once you get the hang of things, your preferences and imperfections will shape your style. I taught you the common way of animating madness, but what you do with that is all up to you. Thanks for watching.